How is everyone? It has been an interesting few weeks globally. We are all coming out of this period of hibernation, and we are, I guess, feeling more open, feeling more afraid, learning more about ourselves, in reflection, perplexed, want to go back into hibernation. It depends on every single person. It's all quite individual, but it's quite interesting. And the last 2 weeks have been really interesting because they've just made us think deeper. They've made us think deeper about the fragility of ourselves in a global system. And nothing that I'm saying here is it's supposed to add curiosity and make people think. It's not about being right or wrong. It's just about sparking curiosity and conversation, because calm conversation is where I function from the best, and learning and educating myself. So today's Bear Talk is with Chef Megha Kohli, and we're going to be talking about ideas of equality and ownership in food. Now, that's quite a broad topic. It can take many different routes and roads to sort of have this conversation and navigate it. But I've chosen quite a couple of areas that are quite specific to me, within my ethnicity, within my mind. So let's define equality first of all. Equal is a state of balance between two or more factors. Now, if these areas are considered in weight, then this metric would work. However, when considering human beings, our role is metaphysical, so therefore our weight is completely bespoke. Yet in this case, our value is based on sensory cues such as voice, taste, other things like culture, food, language, race, socioeconomics, our location, and all the other attributes that define us based on our lived experience and our lived perceptions. Now, those lived perceptions are ours, but they are also judged. Now, we find ourselves making judgment based on perceptions of others too. And if perception and socioeconomic value is a system that we have inherited, then although it may have been a built measure at one period of time and continued, with time and evolution, the measuring stick will probably require a reevaluation. Now, identity, like all things, is built on several notions, right? So it's perceptions, experience, it's exposure. But it's all one's experience and one's lens. However, if we already have a system that has created a formula of how we perceive the world, then how do we value the world today if it's based on old perceptions? And is a redefinition necessary? I mean, this leads me into thinking about, we live in a label culture. I'm 34, female, Indian, British, and a chef. Some would call me a child of colonization. There are many labels I have to uphold. And more honestly, I've also had to put myself and identify myself and put myself in a box for those labels. It's not something that I'm comfortable with, but it's something that I've grown used to doing, like many of you have. Labels make life easy when considering the idea of sugar content in your child's breakfast, or considering, does this item have gelatin in it or not? But they also make life hard because they define things in conjunction to their perceived value. And if I'm perceiving you, that's not your lived experience, because that's my perception, that's me judging you. Now, food is a prime example of this. And this is when we get into the grit of today's discussion, is that there's often a perception that, let's say, Asian food, such as Chinese food, Indian food, Thai, should be cheap and inexpensive. Maybe because it's quick to make, or maybe because it's considered street food, or maybe because it's cost effective for people to travel to those countries, so they think food is cheap. But there's still farmers, there's still livelihoods, and so there's still people that matter as a part of that process. Whereas customers would be willing to pay double, maybe triple the amount if they went to eat at sort of a French bourgeoisie flamboyant restaurant, because the French do have a well-marketed food culture that is marketed across Europe. Now, within that, we could bridge in race and say European is white and Asia is of colour. That's a road we could take. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with taking that route right now because I don't know enough. And I also have my own feelings about this that I haven't quite been able to untangle yet. If I go back to this idea of perceived value and actual value, and if we dial back to equality, the last several months have taught us that our global food systems are operated by people of colour. City dwellers, like many of us, including me, struggle to do the manual jobs of hospitality and farming. For me, it doesn't pay enough to support my life. For other people, it's the same situation based on their livelihoods and their style. But a lot of the times in most countries, what we're seeing is that the skills that we require, we can't pay enough because the industry doesn't pay enough. So the people that we have come in as migrant workers from different countries, different areas within our country. If it's India, they come from different states. If it's in the UK, where I am right now, they come from Europe because we don't have the money to equally pay to support the cost of living in these spaces. But based on that, if we think about different cultures and where they come from, and we think about what people are eating, what we're eating, and what cultures they come from, what we've noticed in the last several months, it's people of colour who make up a large percentage of popular cuisine. And if I can say that a bit better, it would be Italian food, Indian food, Mexican food. It's the people from these traditions that work in our kitchens, that work in our hospitality industry. Now, during the first few weeks of lockdown in the UK shelves were emptied of pasta. It was the first thing to go. We ran out of pasta. Curry is still England's number one dish, and everyone's still drinking turmeric lattes. All these foods come from specific cultures that have been adopted globally, and also from the cultures where the hospitality relies on the most. So there's a disparity between the humans who feed us and their representation within the industries that they work in. It's completely off par. Now, I'm not saying this is a case of appropriation, but more of a lack of education and low representation, which I guess is another conversation which I'm not having here. What I want to talk about is, if we truly understand perception, we also must be able to accept that most things are fed to us by the media. All of our labels are given to us, same as our dislikes and our likes. So today we're going to be exploring this idea of perception in food and between India and the UK, and sort of a global exploration of food narratives and ownerships from different kitchens and different communities. I am going to be speaking to Chef Megha, as mentioned before. She is a phenomenal chef based in Delhi. She's what I would consider a climate-focused chef. She focuses on all of her menus are focused on sustainable produce and zero-waste menus. She was formerly the head chef and head of operations at Lavaash in New Delhi. And during lockdown, she's been, taking us on a culinary journey of Indian food. And we've met, in a couple of other groups that we are a part of. One is the Chef's Manifesto, and she's a phenomenal chef. So if you are here, Megha, if you could just give me a nudge, and I want to add you to the call. Let's see. Oh, can you get Megha? Megha, can you please reveal yourself? Sorry. Oh. Trying to find and maneuver through. Could you send a request again, please? I'm just trying to... technology might be working for us, hopefully. Hi,
How are you?
I am really good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on this conversation.
Oh, no problem. I'm really excited. Sorry, I wanted to do a bit of an introduction just because I felt like it's so easy for this specific topic to go in a different direction. So it's like, just want to be a bit sensitive. Um, I'm just going to switch off the comments. But if anybody does have questions, please, there's a little question mark sign. Please feel free to add questions there. I just don't want Megha's space to be covered with a ream of comments. Give me a second. So how are you? How's life in Delhi?
Life in Delhi is life in lockdown. So we're all at home and trying to, I'm basically just waiting for things to get better. We don't know how long it'll take. So we're all in a limbo as of right now.
And wait, what have you been up to during lockdown?
I've been spending a lot of time with my family. I've been spending a lot of time with myself, which I don't really get to do in this profession. And I've been reading, researching, and I've been creating a lot of IGTVs, recipe videos for Instagram for people to just cook at home, to make people learn how to cook again. And people usually feel that Indian food is very difficult to cook. So I've kind of been trying to break that notion.
No, well, that's really interesting because over here, a lot of people think Indian food is quite easy to cook because, and that goes kind of straight into this conversation actually, which is perfect. Is that we have this notion that Indian food is really easy to cook because it comes in a packet, and Mother
Yeah.
Jeffrey did a fantastic job of
Uh,
packaging Indian food in the early 90s. But
or such things don't exist in our cuisine. What are so popular in the UK, there's no such thing as curry powder in Indian food, and we have to basically, we don't get anything in a packet, so we have to roast our spices, grind our spices, make the curry, chop the onions, make the paste, so then puree the paste. So people think that it's very, very difficult, but actually it's not that difficult, but it's not like it doesn't come out of a packet either.
do you think that do you think in India during this time that people, well, let's like, if you break it down in terms of like Indian households, when I was living in India, I had a maid that came every day, and I also had a cook that came every day. So even though I cooked myself, you, as a chef, you're like, you don't really have always the time to cook for yourself. So I was lucky that there was someone that would come home. But do you still have? Does everyone have their help right now? I know a lot of my friends don't.
Yes.
So
Lockdown
people are.
help has gone back home, so I don't
Yeah.
have help at home, and we have a full-time help who's been with us for 20 years. He's gone back home, and even the part-time maids or the part-time house help who would come to do the dishes and everything, even they aren't coming. So we have responsibilities divided at home, and that's why I feel that people are connecting to a lot of chefs, sharing easy recipes or IGTVs, because right now they're doing the cooking themselves and they don't have help at home. So I feel that chefs sharing recipes right now are is really connecting with people and is really helping people cook at home for their family. Plus, also I feel cooking is therapy. So I feel that it's also something that you do when you're stressed, to just feel less stress for anyone. So I think it's people are kind of discovering the joy of cooking during this lockdown.
What is do you think there's a different demographic cooking now as well in India that maybe have, you know, not ever been not ever had to cook food in some respects?
A lot of my friends like have never cooked in their life. So
Mm.
right now they are the ones who are enjoying my recipes the most and are cooking the most. And they're like, oh, this is not as bad as we thought it was. And earlier it was like, when I was growing up, it was considered cool for girls or boys or people to just say that, oh, I don't know how to cook. I can't even chop an onion. But it's not that cool anymore. Like if someone at a gathering says that, hey, I can't even chop an onion, I'm going to be like, what? Like you can't even chop an onion? So I
Yeah.
think yeah, so I think it's the demographics are different earlier, where people didn't know how to cook, but I think now everyone wants to know how to cook.
That's actually, it's a really interesting one, because I remember when I moved to India, 2012, and I was working for Condé Nast at the time. I would go into the office, and growing up in England, you're used to packaging your own food and having, you know, you're used to it. We don't have any support here. And when I was in India, I had, when I was there, I would take my lunches and people would be like, did you make that yourself? And you're like, yeah, I did. It's normal. They're like, really? It's, my mum wouldn't make my lunch. So, but it's quite amazing that it's changed, and this situation has impacted in a positive way, because people have learned to become more self-reliant during this time. So I'm going to kind of jump into some questions to kind of go from where my introduction was, and they're not, some are pleasant, some are not pleasant, but you know, just be honest, because I feel like what's really been what I've been struggling with recently is knowing who I can talk to about how I feel, because I don't feel like I'm mirrored anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's really that's something that I didn't recognize recently, that I'm not mirrored anywhere, or there's not any people that I can have my conversation with that understand my journey. So it's so nice talking to you last week, and I was like, oh my god, we need to talk about this. So one of the questions that I have is, you know, what is your idea of equality in the context of what we're talking about? What does equality look like when we talk about food, ownership, yeah, identity?
I think food provides a lot of identity to all of us, from where we come from. Like we were discussing rice that day on our
Yeah.
call. So something as simple as rice is cooked in so many different ways. I think equality for me in general is that every person, irrespective of religion, caste, creed, are all equal. And at the end of the day, all people in the world need the same things to survive, or the same thing to
Mm,
make everybody happy. And in
mm,
context of food, I think we all eat very similar food throughout the world. It's just that we take a grain and then some make a chapati with it, some make a pizza with it, or some make tortillas with it.
yeah.
And we all we all derive our food from the soil, and we all have similar habits. And I feel that as humans, we're all equal, and food is a very unifying factor in in the idea of equality.
But then simultaneously, food is the greatest equalizer. It's also the greatest divider.
Yes.
Because right now in India, and also globally, during this pandemic, we have seen the percentage of people that are going hungry go up hugely, and even within environments and demographics that wouldn't necessarily even talk about it, you know, before. And that it's a big issue in India, you're saying right now as well, in terms of, you know, the rates of famine going up.
Yes, rates of famine going up, and also that the food is so or wealth actually is so unevenly distributed, that some have so much have an excess of food available at their for them for the disposal, and there's another half of the population that is going hungry. And ironically, mostly it's the farmers who are unable to feed themselves and are committing suicide. Farmer suicides are going up, and I feel it's not being addressed enough. The problem of hunger in our country, even globally, I feel is not being addressed. I mean, that much attention is not being given to it by the leaders of our respective countries, which I think needs to be done. And whether a new policies, whether it's subsidies, whether it is tax reductions, whether it is making things easier for the poorest to get access to food, I think that needs to be done.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think we, you know, a couple of months ago, we'd had a conversation about this to say, like, and the disparage that comes into my mind is going back to this idea of like equality in food, is to say that the people that work in our kitchens are the ones that are going hungry because they're not paid enough.
Yeah.
So you know, it's not that they don't have the skill. They have the skill, but they don't have the representation in society because they don't get paid enough. They don't live in the right locations. So they're considered to be, they fall into, you know, I'm trying to find the most sensitive word. They fall into a worse situation.
Yeah.
But these are the people that need access to the basics as well. We have, you know, so we talked about this before, is like, how do you feed your staff effectively? Do you feed them dals? Do you introduce them to different types of food? And you could introduce your team to different types of food, but then when a situation like this occurs and they don't even have the basics in place, it's completely out, their mindsets become completely out of balance too. Like in the UK right now, I was on a call yesterday with there's the Centre for Food Policy has their monthly Food Thinker seminar, and every conversation now is about COVID. And you know, they said that one of the main issues with giving food or going to food banks is that it's a cultural issue. People don't know what to do with the food, so you can, and I think, you know, even here in India, you might have we have a better understanding of how to cook basic ingredients like rice, like dal, how to work with vegetables. That is ingrained in our cultural food language as basic food. Whereas in the UK, we don't have that basic education of how to make product, because we grow stuff here, but we don't really live off of our own supply. We live off global food.
Yeah.
So and we live off packaged and processed food. So if you fall into a situation where you are hungry right now and having to rely on food banks, the food that people are taking is food that they understand. So it is baked beans, it is loaves of bread, it is pasta. It's not food that is actually nutritionally beneficial to you, because the other food that you try to get, they don't understand. People don't understand how to cook it, how to process it. It's out of their out of scope of their cultural cooking DNA, if that makes sense.
No, I feel like in India, the cheapest food, the food that is the ingredients that are the cheapest to us, and are the ones that are the most nutritious. Whether it's our seasonal vegetables, whether it's our lentils, grains, everything is really cheap as compared to baked beans, pasta, cheese. All of these things are more expensive as compared to healthy, nutritious food, which is fresh and which is local and seasonal.
Mm.
So I feel in India we're somewhere we're at a better position than the rest of the Western world. Also, I also wanted to share that while I was sharing all of these fancy recipe IGTVs of butter chicken or of like a nice bake or chicken or fish, at the same time as a chef, there was a lot of guilt inside me. And I spoke to my mom. I was like, should I be doing this when there are migrants that are walking back home, trying to walk back home, don't have food, and are literally dying every day. And here I am as a chef eating the fanciest of food when I can see every day on my Instagram and on the news about so many people dying in my own country due to no money, no food, and no transport. But then I realized that you know I should keep doing what I'm doing, but you end up feeling very guilty as well. And I know I felt a lot of guilt and there was this phase of 10 days when I didn't put anything up because I was like, I can't do it. When there's so many people dying, I can't just be cooking and, you know, but then I realized that there are a lot of people who are also at home, who are also, who are using cooking as a medium to feel happy or to feel less stressed. And maybe I should just do it for that audience of mine. And I'm sure a lot of other chefs felt the same twinge of guilt too.
I think it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because a lot of chefs that I know that have through this period, you know, we're also like, it's my job to serve right now. I don't have anyone to serve. So who's closest to my faculty right now? And that's my family.
Yeah.
If you are residing with your family, I was with my parents for 3 months. But you know, how do you serve somebody else during this period when you can't? And I mean, I wouldn't do yourself a disservice there. You do serve in different ways through educating and being a participant on different platforms and having a conversation and having the dialogue that people may not be able to have. And I think during this time, that's also been a really important role of chefs to say, well, actually, we're gonna speak about marginalization. We're going to speak about issues. We're going to talk about it. And because a lot of people are just, you know, we want to be creative on social media and, you know, project. And I do say it's project because we want to have audience, we want to do something. So we project this identity, but there is guilt.
Yeah.
So I think it's also being kind to yourself during this moment, but being aware. And I think this whole situation at the moment that we're in is asking us to educate ourselves deeper. The whole 3 months, the activities of the last 2 weeks, even prior to that, you know, our conversation last week was about the riots in Delhi. over December and January, that was also demanding that people educate themselves better on what it is to be Indian, what it is to have an identity, and what that actually means. Because, you know, and I'm not trying to sort of start any fires right now, but the the divisions that were felt within the community in India were also felt here within the Indian community, in the diaspora community. And I just found it so surprising that we're able to constantly find divisions amongst ourselves during times of need. But in the last 2 weeks, everyone has been very much reawoken to think about what are their divisions? Why do they have these divisions? And can they understand the roots of these divisions? Some are thinking about it, some aren't, but we're thinking nonetheless. This is interesting because when we talk about when we talk about sort of food equality, and is it representative? Is cuisine representative of the people who make our food? You wrote a piece about Bihar cuisine, correct?
Yeah.
And Bihar is still considered the poorest state in India.
Yeah, Bihar and
Bihar and Chhattisgarh. And so what I find interesting is that these two states, Chhattisgarh is lots of coal mining in Chhattisgarh, right? And the food of these areas, people wouldn't consider the cuisine of these areas. They would consider the poverty in these areas. So, but it's also the migrants that of these states that come into work in the cities, and they do the jobs in the restaurants. They wash your dishes in the restaurant. They will work in the kitchens. They will chop your onions. So it's very misrepresented.
Bihar was my sous chef, and he was my right hand, and I used to run by everything through him. And I think he's actually the person I've been missing the most in this lockdown. But I feel I feel that it's not just Bihar or Chhattisgarh. I had decided to showcase the cuisine of different states of India a while back, and around 3 years ago, I had done a pop-up on northeastern food with another sous chef who was from the northeast. Then I did Bihar, and then I did Uttarakhand as well. I feel that as Indians, many of us are ignorant about the food of our own country. Like as I was telling you, that if someone were to ask my brother, for example, or my brother's friends, that, what is Maharashtra or Bombay known for and in food, and first thing that they would say is vada pav, and they would be able to say anything more beyond it. Or what is the Northeast known for? They would say maybe momos or dim sums. That's what they eat, but they wouldn't know anything more. If you ask them what is the food of Gujarat, they would be like, it's sweet food. They make sweet food. Thepla, dhokla, and baki unka khana meetha hai. Rest of the food is sweet. So I felt that I've always been very passionate about Indian food, and I felt that this is what I want to do, and I want to bring Indian food on the global map. But that can only happen once I can bring lesser known Indian food from different Indian states on the Indian. The first step was getting Indians to know about their food. That's why I started with the Northeast, and I went to Bihar. Then, I moved to Bihar as a pop-up, and then to Uttarakhand as a pop-up. And I also had a seasonal regional food menu, which was called Chef Megha's winter specials, summer specials, monsoon specials, and those only featured regional Indian dishes. Lesser known regional Indian dishes from different states. And slowly I realized that the response that I was getting for my specials and for these pop-ups was better than the response that what I was getting for my main menu. And when I would do my your item-wise sales report, when you sit at the end of the month to see what most, there were obviously 2 or 3 massy dishes that were always at the top. But after that, it was regional food everywhere, and soon I started getting recognized for my efforts in this space. And I'm glad that I did what I did, and I've decided that this is what I want to do. Even post the pandemic, when we all go back to work, and when I go to a new place, I want to focus on this.
Yeah, that would exactly. I think this is you've just touched on the idea that we have misrepresented ourselves.
Yes.
Um,
We have
and
been put into and I also wanted to say that for Indian food to be put on the global map, the global world needs to take us out of that box that they've put us in of curry and naan. We are so much
yeah,
more than that.
yeah,
So despite all the efforts that a lot of chefs are making, like I'm making efforts to make people more aware about lesser known dishes. There are chefs who are making an effort to make people know about lesser known Indian ingredients. It's a combined effort that a lot of chefs in India are now doing. But I feel that till the time that we are still put in that box of curry and naan, we all our efforts are in vain. So everybody else across the world also needs to wake up to the fact that there's so much more to our food than just tikkas or
yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think this is again. It goes back to the idea of perception. Is that we have these preconceived conceptions of what this is, and then it's been labeled that way, and that's it. And again, that labeling is then conditioned to us by our supermarket experience, our shopping experience. When we swipe on Instagram, everything is, we are taught all of these things, and it takes a level of deeper education to kind of go, actually, let me be a bit curious, to be excited about what's happening. So the work that you're doing is phenomenal, because we need more chefs in positions of power and education and leadership to say, well, actually, let's give more visibility to the areas that are more interesting, that you may not know about, but are delicious.
Yeah.
And also, let's in the same moment, let's also give representation to the people of those areas as well, equally. Because you're so right, in the UK, it's like, if people ask me, they're like, a few weeks ago, somebody said to me, can I have your recipe for dal? And I was like, sure. Like, it's sure, you can have my recipe for dal. That was one day, but the next day I had a close friend of mine who's much older than me and English, and was giving me his recipe for dal. And I was like, that's delicious. Like, I'm going to use that recipe instead. But he spent 10 years in Calcutta. So his recipe I had never tried, because I'm from Gujarat and via East Africa. So there is the people who do want to educate themselves, do educate themselves. So, and it makes me think, and that specific situation made me think, is that there is no ownership of a recipe. There is no ownership of a style, but there is authenticity, and there is equal representation, which doesn't always exist in the food systems that we have today. And I think one thing that it's just made me think, but I'm trying to hold myself back from saying it, is that, I mean, as a chef, I often feel that if I cook Indian food, that I'm potentially being too simple, because I live in England.
Yeah.
And I didn't really recognize that for myself until just speaking to you, that I sometimes am like, if I make Indian food, isn't it a bit obvious because I'm Indian? Because everybody expects me to cook good Indian food, so I should do something that's not expected, even though I can cook Indian food pretty okay. My mum's better, obviously. I think I've lost you. Oh, there you go. So I'm going to ask you about the January riots, and you, again, going back to it, it's a sensitive topic, but it's an undeniable fact that sort of people of color, even within their own color group, they put a system in place. India, we have this caste system in place. We have a societal system in place. India has a very steep hierarchy. And we had this conversation about rice. And in my mind, I feel rice is a great unifier of culture, because we all have a relationship with grain of some sort. But the history of rice is quite remarkable, and it is steeped in colonization and a lot of other difficult stories. But also, rice is a medium that people can really connect with because it's simple and they can eat it with whatever they have. They have flavor, they don't have flavor, they have salt, they have dry fish. What do they have? And you did this, and you sent me this amazing piece of writing where you explored uh, Muslim, the impact of Muslim culture in on Indian cuisine.
Yeah.
Please tell me about that, because I think that is such a pertinent example of what we're discussing.
So I was approached by this big university in Delhi, and if they were writing that talks a lot about social action, based in Lodi Road, and they were coming out with their they basically do three three books every year where they talk about a different community and the impact that it's had on India. So it can also be a community from within India. So this year their theme was the impact of Muslims on India, and
Mm-hmm.
the book is divided into different chapters. I think around 10 chapters, and I've written the chapter on food. So I've written about the impact of the Arab traders on the food of India, about the Mopla community in Kerala, the Mopla Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Then also about the Ottomans and the Turks, and I have written about. I can't remember. I wrote it 6 months ago. I've written about basically every Muslim community that ever came to India centuries ago till date, and I've written about the impact of them on our cuisine. And I somehow feel this connect with Muslim food in India, whether it's the gullies of old Delhi, whether it is the Muslim food in Karnataka. When I went to Karnataka, I remember the first place that I went to was the Muslim market. Whether it is any place, I just somehow connect with that community a lot. And even though I'm not a Muslim, I just have this weird connection. And I really enjoyed writing this piece, and where I discovered that yogurt was brought into India by the Muslims. Our biryani, which India is now known for, was brought to us from Persia. uh,
Mm-hmm.
I discovered that I'd written it along with another chef, Lavaash, used to work with me, and we both somehow have this fascination for this culture and this community. And nuts, dry fruits, gulab jamun, quintessential Indian dessert that actually was brought to us from the Muslims.
That's my favorite Indian dessert.
The
So
tandoor.
good.
So all of this,
Yep.
what I discovered, and what I really, it was I think a 5 to 6,000 word chapter, and it was very detailed. And even in those 6,000 words, we missed out 3-4 communities because we just didn't have more word space to write. So it was a lot of fun and a lot of learning. When I was doing a lot of research, when I was calling up people, speaking to a lot of people, uh, researchers and historians, to put together this article. It was a great learning for me as a chef too. And I felt that despite the fact that I'm a chef, despite the fact that I research and my specialization is regional Indian cuisine, there's so many things that I still don't know. And this is just one community, and in India there are hundreds of communities that you can that you can research on. And it just made me realize that there's still a long way to go.
So do you think that right now in, because I found your writing that you wrote was phenomenal. I read it again this morning just to remind myself, and I loved how you put it in order of all the rulers. So it's the ruler that that's like the furthest away from you, but to the most recent ones. And there was, the last thing I read was the introduction of cake into India, and everybody wants to take hold of cake, but also cherries and different types of fruits that came into India, and how um, nothing could compare to mango, because mango is like sort of, if we had a fruit pyramid in India, mango sits at the top. It's like on the throne. But exactly. But what I loved about that piece is that when I was reading it, and having lived in Maharashtra and Goa is that I was able to understand the influences and where I've seen them the most. And a lot of that Persian influence, I feel like I've seen in Maharashtra across the board. And especially, like, I'm from India originally, but especially in India too. And somehow those cultures have swept their way into my kitchen cabinet in the UK, even though my parents grew up in East Africa. So it's interesting how that ownership of the identity, which which my parents would consider Gujarati, about making kheer with sultanas inside it, but it's not actually their influence. It's a Persian influence of putting
Yeah.
the dried fruits in kheer. They would consider it Gujarati, but
Yeah.
and but that's a rice dish, and you're like, well, actually, you put milk, sugar, rice, a few sultanas in there, and there's your dish. I mean, that's not the best way to make it, but and it's what I find really interesting about this situation is that we've taken ownership of that dish,
Yeah.
but then it's very difficult for us to re-educate ourselves and to understand the history of this. Now, why it's more important right now is that as we are all separated and living in different places, the hospitality works on the foundation in India and the rest of the world of these different migrant communities, lower income, lower income communities working in these establishments. So do you think there'll be, because of this time, do you think there'll be more ownership of, or chefs will take more ownership in ensuring that there's representation during this time? I do representation of the cuisine of their workers in their work environments. That could be a complete no or a don't know, but I think it's something that we need to think about.
Yeah, I think that chefs will end up taking more ownership, and I feel that chefs should use this time to research and read up about the authenticity and where a certain dish comes from, because many times I've seen a lot of dishes being misrepresented, or certain facts not being reported correctly by even chefs. So I feel that when you're a chef, then people are really going to trust and take your word for it, that okay, this is a chef and this is what this chef is saying about a dish. I feel that what I do as a chef is I take a dish and I break it down. So if I take a butter chicken, I will break it down to see where. So it might be a Punjabi dish, but actually butter chicken uses a tandoori chicken or a chicken tikka in their,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
is a Muslim influence. Then we
yep.
use tomatoes. Tomatoes were not traditionally used by Punjabis in their cooking, and tomatoes are a Mughal influence using tomatoes. So then and then maybe you can see certain spices that go into a butter chicken, a garam masala or chilies. Chilies come from Portugal. They don't.
Not
They were.
ours.
And so basically, once you break a dish down, you end up realizing all of the different communities that have come together so beautifully in that one bowl or that one pan to make that dish that you think is only of your community, but it's been made by around 10 different communities. So and you have taken ownership of that dish, but is it actually yours? Is
That's so beautiful. Exactly. That's literally, I have two paragraphs written here, which is literally verbatim of what you've just said, which is the thing. It's like, India spiced its food with pepper. That's where our heat came from. We're not chili people,
yeah.
but we've taken the chili. Do we have the
Own
Portuguese?
chili and how? It's like chili is Indian, whereas it's actually not.
Yeah, like, does it have chili in there? No. Oh, it's not Indian then. Oh, it's not really spicy. You're like, really? Like, it's pepper. Try it. Try it. Just try it. But it's the sort of the representation and the iconography that we've created. It's like, we have the nimbu and the mirch outside our house to ward
Yeah.
away evil, but
Yeah.
we also have it in our food because that's our flavor. But actually, it's not true of the land, the farmers. It's not the true cultivation, and that it also sort of creates a problem in terms of what farmers can grow in the country and what we become attached to as our identity in food. And there's a misrepresentation because, again, it's a lack of education. But it is true that today that we have this humble bowl of dal or butter chicken that has multiple different influences from around the world and is made in different ways. So essentially, it's yours. It's not anyone else's.
Yeah.
It's just yours. So nice. Um, do you think, is there a way in which you feel, or ways in which you feel that food can work to become a better connector? So you've said once, which is chefs can educate themselves and, you know, give equal representation to all the dishes of India. And I'm sure chefs in the UK could also do that, because they could give more representation of the people who make those dishes, give people the opportunities that are of that background to, you know, to show their skills, or at least, you know, give greater representation to them as opposed to now. What else do you think can be done?
Can be done to make food a universal connector?
Well, a greater connector. So you've talked about education, chefs doing more as actors in our food supply chain. What else do you think? Is there anything that consumers could do? Is there anything that we
Just
could do?
know what you're buying.
Okay.
Make a what I'm talking from the consumer's perspective. Um,
Yeah.
know what you're buying, read the label, read where it comes from, read, is it seasonal, is it local, is it fresh. The moment you buy something that is local and seasonal, you end up, you are supporting the people of your country. You are supporting a local farmer or a local grower or even a local supplier or a local vendor. That money is being used to support someone from within your community. So be conscious of what you're buying, be conscious of how much you cook. I am not a great advocate of food waste, because I feel that there are other chefs who are doing a far better job at it than what I can ever do. So I talk to maybe like a Radhika, or to who does a lot. She's my friend, and I follow her a lot for food waste. And so I feel follow chefs who are championing food waste, and don't try to waste as less as you can, whether it's peels, whether it's seeds. So I remember, even as a chef, even if you're a chef, have no shame in calling up another chef who is championing a certain cause, and ask them that, hey, I have this line with me. What do you think I can do? So I call up Radhika really often that, okay, I'm cooking with pumpkin. What can I do with the skin? Or I'm cooking with,
Yeah.
what can I do with this, with the seeds? Don't have any shame in calling up people. Or, even if you're a chef, you can't just think that, oh, I don't know. I don't know what to do about this, but if I call up another chef, they'll think that I don't know. I think as a community, build on each other's strengths and lift each other up and take guidance from each other. Whether you're a chef or whether you're a consumer, just be aware. As a consumer and as a chef, be aware of the impact that food has on your community and on your planet as well. And I think that people are just not aware of the fact. Are not aware of the role that food plays, whether it's in climate change or whether it's in bringing together more unity. So I think once people wake up and realize that this is the role that food plays, things will be much better.
Yeah. That's I really like what you said about shame. I think that's really important. You know, and if you go back to what you said earlier, is that we have this we live in this guilt complex of, am I doing enough? But then shame of, oh, I don't know how to. So you sort of going from two loggerheads of shame and guilt, shame and guilt, shame and guilt. And you almost have to break out of that pattern to say, well, actually, if education and educating myself to educate others is my priority, then there is no shame in asking a question. There is no shame in saying how, why, because it's only when you ask those questions you're going to learn something new. And if you and you're going to educate yourself a little bit deeper. So that's and it's, I think, especially in the food industry, because we sometimes think we know it all, but if we go back to the fact that nothing is ours anyway and everything is learned and is constantly changing, then actually there is no ownership of a recipe or an idea. An idea is just to be shared and passed on and learned. And hopefully the zero waste ideas that we have right now, you know, hopefully they evolve in the next 30 or 40 years and they're sort of captured and ingrained into consumer mindset. So we learn not to waste in different ways and be more creative with it. Yeah, Radhika's recent watermelon recipe was phenomenal. I was like, oh my God, I would like, what am I going to do with this? I used it for watermelon for like tapechi, but not in a curry. I was like, this looks delicious. It's amazing. So we've gone through this journey of understanding food and constantly coming back to this idea of it's a great connector. There's nobody owns it. What are you owning in your bowl right now? What are you eating right now? What's in your bowl? Like, what is the most exciting thing for you to eat at the moment?
What is the most exciting thing for me to eat, or what am I eating these days?
Are you eating right now?
No, I just had lunch.
I was like, how are you doing that so secretly? No, what is the most interesting thing for you to eat at the moment? What are you eating? What are you enjoying at the moment in your bowl?
I'm enjoying rice.
Okay.
And I'm enjoying bran roti. So roti made with bran flour. So it's healthier, it has more fiber, and yeah, and I'm enjoying my rice a lot. I'm cooking a lot of different kinds of rice, whether it's experimenting with different rice recipes, whether it's ghee rice, whether it's lemon rice, tamarind rice, tomato rice, black pepper rice that I've been making, black pepper and curry leaf rice. So I'm enjoying cooking rice in different ways, and I'm also enjoying cooking rice from different states. So at home right now, I have black rice from the Northeast.
I love black rice.
So that is really delicious. And I also have red rice from Karnataka
Yeah.
that I've been eating. So I've been experimenting a lot in eating rice these days. And the seasonal summer fruits like tinda, lauki, tori. These are my favorite vegetables. So I'm
So good.
enjoying eating those in summer. It's light on the stomach and healthy as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you mentioned that because all of those vegetables are exactly what I'm getting here from my Indian supermarket. And living with my parents for 3 months, it's been amazing because I'm just like devouring all these Indian vegetables again because they're like, can you go to Shiva Shakti, which is a store in Leicester? And they're like, can you just go and get like dinda? Can you go and get drumsticks? Can you get this? And I'm like, yeah, I can get it all. I feel like I was in India again. I was like, it's amazing. But yeah, I hear you on the rice. I think I might make some day rice today, which I've not had in a very, very long time. Yeah, I might actually ask you for your recipe. So, a question that I always like to we have actually a couple of questions. 1 second. The question was 1 second. Curious to learn more and wanted to request a suggestion for readings for the history of food, trade, and culture. Oh, 1 second. Let me get this question up. Within the Mensa region.
With curious to learn more and wanted to request for suggestions
About food, trade, and food history from the Menasa region. MENASA.
Melissa, I don't know. This is the book that I follow for history of food trade and food cultures. It's called A History of Food in India. This is India specific.
Ah, really?
Yeah. It's called Feasts and Fasts, or History of Food in India. So you can perhaps read.
Okay. I'm just... so, okay. It's kind of looking across Asia. That's where we're looking. It's like northern India, going from like northwest India to northeast India, all the way across through to Asia.
Yeah,
So this is the book.
Yeah.
This is the book. Would you just show that one more time?
Feasts and Fasts, A History of Food in India.
Okay, amazing.
Books, yeah.
Great. And last question that I would have for you is, what's home? What's the meaning of home for you?
My parents, and wherever my parents and my grandfather and my brother are, that's home. Like I've been living with my family since I was born, and yeah, that's home for me. And food related, a curry of coconut chicken curry and a bowl of rice, or a bowl of rajma and rice is home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Do you have any final thoughts, Megha?
I just want to thank you for bringing forward this discussion, and I feel we should take it further. And I think there's so much more that we can do with what we've discussed today. And I'll be calling you soon to discuss things.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think finding the people that you feel comfortable to talk about this is really important. And I think dare I say this, I think finding somebody that has the same skin color as me has been really important to have this conversation with, because I feel like I can look at you and I can anchor, because you're not seeing the color of my skin, but you totally understand it already. So thank you as well, and I look forward to more discussions.
Same
Um,
here.
so thanks everybody who joined in the call. It's really amazing. And Megha, I will speak to you very, very soon.
Yes, done. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye.